So, what is schizo-affective disorder and how is it different to schizophrenia? Well, basically, schizo-affective disorder has got a lot more in common with bipolar disorder than it has with schizophrenia. Essentially, it's bipolar disorder, where you would get manic depression, manic episodes from time to time. And for me, this was pretty much at the same time of the year, around about the time of my birthday, end of October time. If I wasn't being medicated at the time, and especially if I was smoking weed at the time, which I usually was back in those days, I would get a manic episode, which the doctors would pick up on after I had been diagnosed. I was initially diagnosed with bipolar to start with for the first few years before they reclassified me with schizo-affective. But what it is that you just get a few of the schizophrenic symptoms thrown in when you have your manic episode. So certain types of delusions will be more bizarre than usual, than would be usually expected from bipolars. But I think really because I was smoking weed, that's what brought out those symptoms and made them more clearer, presenting more clearer to the doctors at the time. And so it ticked enough of the boxes for my delusions to be valid, to be considered the same as schizophrenia. So it's essentially a few schizophrenic symptoms thrown in that you get when you're manic, when you're going for a manic episode. And that's all it is. So the difference is that usually, not all, but an awful lot of people with full-blown schizophrenia have it pretty bad. The medication that they take, even if they're on it regularly and take it regularly and are compliant with their medication, they often will still suffer from relapses and continued hospitalizations, unfortunately. That's not the same for everyone, but it's more common with schizophrenia than it is with schizoaffective disorder and bipolars. That's the problem. That's why it's the worst mental illness to have is schizophrenia, because it's just the most debilitating one out of the lot. So I'm lucky in that I had schizoaffective disorder because it being the mixture of the two, bipolar and schizophrenia, meant that medication, when I did start taking it regularly, because this didn't happen straight away, and that is also my fault. It's not just the fault of the psychiatrist fucking things up a lot. My own adversity towards a psychiatrist to start with, I was very much against the system. I hated it. I hated the fact that the antipsychotics that they were giving me were making my ADHD far worse and reducing my level of concentration, so I couldn't work making music and writing so easily. So I hated it all, and I was very much against taking medication. So what would happen with me was that in the early days, the first decade or so of my mental illness, since I was first diagnosed at the end of the year 2000 and the beginning of the year 2001, whilst I was in my first hospital admission, what happened is that I would just continue to go in and out of hospital constantly, because what would happen is, well, the cycle would be this. It would be, I would get put on an oral medication, which I would start taking, but then I would stop taking because I didn't want to take it anymore and I felt fine. So then I would be okay, but up and down a little bit, not perfectly stable for most of the year. And then when my manic episode would come along at near the end of the year, at the end of October, that's when the doctors would notice that my presentation was different, and I was obviously suffering from a manic episode. Various things would happen, some of them rather extreme, and I would get hospitalized. So in the early days, I would get sectioned because I refused to go to hospital. But I soon realized that, if you agree to go to hospital, you don't have to be sectioned, so you don't have to spend as long in there. But usually they would put me on to a depot injection, which would have been one of the old style antipsychotic medications, such as as they were originally referred to in the 50s and 60s as chemical lobotomies. And so some of those drugs were actual torture drugs. They really, really were terrible drugs to get put on. And I had a terrible time of it. So if I was on one of those drugs by the time October came around, then I would be fine. I wouldn't get my manic episode. But if I wasn't, and if I had a tribunal to get off the Section 3, then I would be able to get off of the depot injection and go on to oral medication. And of course, then what would happen is that I would stop taking the oral medication and then be mostly fine, seeing my CPN, my community psychiatric nurse, once a week, with them reporting back, yes, Simon seems stable at the moment, relatively stable, until the end of the year again would come along. And if I wasn't on medication, then I would get my manic episode, I would get sectioned, or I would have to go to hospital again, get onto the depot injection, have another tribunal, get off the depot injection, go on to the... It would go on and on. This went on for almost a decade, in and out of hospital constantly, until I finally agreed to start taking the regular medication, oral medication, and it was olanzapine that I ended up starting to take. And all this happened between the years of the end of the year 2000, the beginning of the year 2001, right up until February 2012, when I finally agreed to start taking regular medication, and it was olanzapine. So, after being on olanzapine for about 3 to 4 years, what I noticed was that actually my ADHD, which I didn't get a proper diagnosis for until about 2010, and the doctors just said, well, we can't really treat you for this because the treatment is stimulants, it's amphetamines, and we can't give you that drug because it'll interfere and mess up the antipsychotic medication that you're on. It won't help you at all. And they were right about that, actually. What happened is that my ADHD and my anxiety problems, which was brought on, I had very heavy social anxiety problems throughout life. And that was all brought on from having narcissistic, abusive parents that had done their utmost to sabotage my life all my life since I was a child, right up to now. They're still abusing me even now at my age, and I'm 51 years old now, and my parents are still abusing me and my children at this point in time. Yes, finally having those major underlying conditions treated by the same medication that was supposed to just treat my schizo-affective disorder, finally treated, that was the revolution in my mind and in my life. That was the thing that changed the most. Finally being able to concentrate better, finally being able to have better memory recall function, which had been dysfunctional for such a long time. That's what changed everything. And that didn't happen until about 2016, early to mid 2016, about the summer. The difference between schizoaffective disorder and schizophrenia is that usually for people with schizophrenia, the prognosis isn't good, usually. Some people are okay, but on the whole, most schizophrenics have it pretty bad, because even when they're on regular medication and they agree to take the medication regularly, they will more often than not still suffer from the occasional relapse and continued hospitalization because of those relapses. But with my condition being the one in the middle, the mixture of bipolar and the mixture of bipolar and schizophrenia, luckily, thank God for this, the medication keeps me stable, and it doesn't just keep me stable, it keeps me more able than I would be otherwise, because it stabilizes my dopamine levels and regulates that dopamine levels. And that's also how it treats my ADHD as well. So at the moment I'm on an e-cigarette, and I want a nicotine reduction program so I can reduce very slowly my nicotine consumption. So because I need the nicotine at the moment still to help regulate my dopamine levels, because although nicotine isn't a dopamine agonist directly, what it does still do is have an effect on the central nervous system, which makes you produce more dopamine. So it's the same as a stimulant, other types of stimulants like amphetamines or methamphetamine or cocaine, even if you're going to try that. It will produce more dopamine. So my body has to adapt to slowly, very slowly, to having less and less nicotine. So with the e-cigarette, I can do that. With regular tobacco, I can't do that, because if I had a pack of tobacco in front of me, I would just smoke it up in a matter of days. It would be gone very quickly. So that's no way to regulate your nicotine input. But with e-liquid, I can reduce my nicotine consumption very slowly over a very long period of time, meaning that my body has the time to adapt, because the body's central nervous system takes a long time to adapt to change. So I can reduce my nicotine consumption very slowly, and my body can adapt to that reduction and continue to produce more dopamine to compensate for the fact that it's not getting the help from the nicotine anymore, because it's getting less nicotine. And so hopefully by the end of the year or the beginning of next year, I will be able to come off the e-cigarette totally, completely, and no longer need nicotine. So anyway, the difference between schizo-affective disorder and schizophrenia. One last thing to say. So with schizophrenia, you can continue to have delusions, you can continue to have paranoid delusions and problems throughout your life, whether you're on medication or not. But with schizo-affective disorder, essentially, if you take your medication, and so long as you're not getting any manic episodes anymore, then you're not going to be suffering from any more of the schizophrenic symptoms. So I'm fine now, and I don't suffer from schizophrenia. So anyone that says that I do, they're lying, and they don't know me. They've probably never met me, and they haven't got a clue what they're bloody well talking about. Okay, I think I'll leave it at that with this one. It looks like it's been about 12 minutes, nearly 13 minutes. Overtime. I'm trying to keep these podcasts down to 10 minutes, you see, so anyway, I'll leave it at that for now. I hope you have a nice day. Goodbye.